Welcome to Resilience Unravelled. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Thackeray. This podcast is a result of my fascination with health issues, resilience, performance, mental health, accountability and critical thinking, along with many of the other obsessions I bump into in my life. I spend my time working with highly successful teams, organisations and people, and this podcast introduces their remarkable stories, as well as my synthesis of the key issues, tips and strategies to thrive in life. If you find this podcast useful, you can also find other information at qedod.com or russellthackeray.com. Stay tuned to the end for details of how to order a free ebook. Enjoy the podcast. So today I'm talking to Ewan Flynn, and today's podcast might be a little bit different because normally we're talking about people and their own resilience, but Ewan's got a different take on things. He's written a very interesting book about the trials and tribulations of football supporters. And a lot of my colleagues who are from the world of sport actually will be very approving of the fact that at last I'm working my way into the sort of sports arena, because my view of resilience has always been based around sort of performing arts and such like. So I'm hoping Ewan's going to give me and all of you an interesting introduction into the life of a football supporter, what that means, but actually not just a football supporter, sports as well. And he'll talk a little bit about what being a supporter is like, but also different types of sports, ownership models, and all sorts of different pieces depending on where our conversation goes. So first off, hi Ewan.
Hi Russell, how are you doing?
I'm good. And where in the world are you talking to us from? There's a lot of people in America who listen to this. So where would you say you're from?
Glamorous and beautiful North London.
And for those of you in the States listening to you, and he has what's called the North London accent. Now, I suppose we have to get these things out of the way. Football team. Who's your football team of choice?
So I'm a Tottenham Hotspur Spurs supporter. So I grew up in this part of North London where Spurs play.
Favorite tennis player?
Favourite tennis player, absolutely Roger Federer. It's an easy choice.
So all these people about style, isn't it? And Formula One?
I'm not too big into motor racing, to be honest. So no, that's not my cup of tea really. But yeah, tennis and football.
You prefer the sports with balls?
Yeah.
So Ewan, what would you describe yourself as? Tell us a little bit about your story so far.
Yeah, so I'm basically in a period of transition, really, Russell. So I've been working for a university in London, a really good institution, but I've been there a really long time. And sort of away from work, I wrote my book, which was published last year. And I'm kind of at the point, a bit of a crossroads, where I want to go in a different direction and concentrate more on writing and the sort of things that I'm passionate about, which really is sport and focusing on that. And yeah, as I say, moving away from the sort of operational administration work that I've done.
And you've written one book already, and I mean, you sort of pass that by quite quickly as if it was something that was easy, but holding down a full-time job and writing a book that's been successful is no mean task, is it? So I'm guessing there's quite a lot of personal discipline involved in writing something in your spare time?
Yeah, I think there is. And I went on a one-day course at The Guardian, which was about sort of beginning writing a book. And it was a one-day course, but it just absolutely blew my mind. It was so good. It was by a writer called Andrew Miller, who's a novelist. And his advice was just, to just get into a habit of discipline. And, it's simple advice, but often the best advice really is simple. Just get into a routine of writing every day. It doesn't matter what about even. Just if you want to write, you need to write. So get up every day. So I used to get up at sort of, 6 a.m, just bash out what I could on the computer every day. And that got me into that routine. And, I can underplay it a little bit, but actually I found that I really loved doing it. So it didn't feel like work. I loved writing my book. It was just the best sort of feeling I've had. And yeah, that thing of getting in a routine and just writing. And his other advice, which I think was brilliant, was also not necessarily worrying too much about having a definite structure at the outset. But he kind of said, write where you have a sweet spot. Just start where you feel comfortable starting. So, it could be in the middle of the story you want to tell, could be at the end. but just, start there, because that gets you going and gets you in a rhythm, and, put some words down that you can then build on. So I thought it was a brilliant bit of advice, and it was, it was a few hours, that course, but it sort of definitely set me on my way to, sort of year and a half later, having a finished book, which was an amazing feeling. But I'm really grateful to him for that advice.
We'll get into the book in a bit more detail in a bit, but it must be quite interesting, sort of, having that generic idea, writing what you're interested in, and then seeing a finished product. It must be a real sense of fulfillment and achievement.
Yeah, absolutely. I went up to Glasgow, where the book was actually printed, to see it coming off the print, and it was just the most incredible. I haven't got kids. Hopefully one day I might, but I've heard people say that, for men, the closest you get to giving birth is sort of writing a book. I don't know how true that is, but it was such an amazing feeling to see something that you've done. You've been sitting on your own, sort of typing away for however long it may be, and then suddenly there's this moment where, even though obviously at that point other people have read it and said, the publishers have said we're going to go with it, whatever, but until you see it actually coming off that sort of production line, you can't believe that it's actually real, and then it's out there for the world. So you're sort of doing something in isolation, but then suddenly it all comes to be. Really, it's just an amazing feeling. Yeah.
And I mean, the grit and determination you have to have is amazing, because you must get fed up, and you must have. I mean, you hear of writer's block and such like, don't you? So I'm assuming you go through all that stuff.
Yeah, I think possibly the hardest bit for me was, I was really lucky, but in some ways unlucky as well. And that I probably made quite a bad decision. But being a first-time author, I got a publishing deal quite quickly, but with a publishing house who perhaps, let's say, didn't have the necessary resources to make it what I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And, because I was kind of like, I was just so thrilled that someone said that it was good and that they wanted to take it, I kind of, went with them. And then things weren't working out in quite the way I hoped with them. And, I had some concerns, and actually they effectively went bust just at the point where it was supposed to be coming out. And I was, at the same time, I was coming out of essentially a divorce, really. I'd been together with my partner for 10 years. And so it just, at that point, everything seemed to be collapsing. And you know what they say about, like, maybe you can deal with one problem, but when you've got two big ones or three or four, that's when you really start to suffer. So yeah, I had all that going on. But then luckily, and this was where I really learned a valuable lesson about how important, networks and contacts are. Someone who'd given me a lot of help during the development of the book, put me in touch with different publishers who then did take it, and who are really well connected. That meant, the book got the publicity that I wanted for it, got it into the big bookshops, and that, it was just the help that someone gave me at that point was huge, because it was in danger of, not working out the way I'd wanted it to.
It's your classic thing about asking for help as a sign of strength, isn't it? If you don't ask for help, no one helps, do they? So it's useful.
Exactly.
So, excuse me. Tell me about the life of a football fan, and Ewan. What is the lot of a football fan?
Well, so my book actually is more about playing football as an amateur footballer, but my fandom sort of is all wrapped into that. So, I kind of, I always want, like most young British males, I wanted to be a professional footballer. It was never going to happen. Never had anywhere near the talent to do that. But I loved the game, loved playing. So I just kept playing, I still play now. But I kept sort of playing organised football with my friends, kind of guys that I'd gone to school with, some of them that I've known since I was 4 or 5, but mostly from 11 onwards. And we kept playing, as a team. I went to university, and then when I came back to London, kept playing as a team. So the book is kind of about our team and how we sort of rose up through the amateur leagues and what we achieved. But yeah, the commitment it takes to play sort of amateur sports. Someone's got to volunteer to run the team. There's kits to wash. there's all the stuff, the admin that goes around it, but it just gives you something so special, that sort of sense of community, which, you know, I think is something that perhaps we don't find that easily in modern life. You know, achieving things with other people isn't necessarily that easy to do. Sort of a lot of pursuits are more solitary now. You know, that's just my interpretation, but I do think there's some truth in that. It is hard. But when you achieve something with other people, it's a brilliant feeling. So, you know, a team sport just gives you that sense of we won together. You know, you lose together as well sometimes, but, you know, winning together is just a brilliant feeling. And then out of the book, obviously, that kind of tells our story as a team, but also some of the players who formed that team. And we were a good side. Some of those boys had professional careers, only fleeting ones, but the book goes back and tells what kind of happened to them and their backstory. So, and now they've got that book that they can show to their kids, and so I think it is it's a special book to me anyway, because it's my first book, but actually it's about my friends, it's about a particular time in our lives. And I think what's been so nice about it is the feedback that I've had is so many people can relate to it, because not necessarily just football, but, you know, people in America who play what we call American football. It's the same, you know, team sports. We can kind of all, people that have played them or people that have been involved, whether it be as, you know, parents who take their kids to play at the weekend, everyone who's been in that sort of world can relate to it. So yeah, it's special to me in that way.
And it's what's called a Sunday League team. So what does that mean?
So Sunday League is an interesting sort of thing. So in England, when organised football first started, the Football Association, who were the governing body of football, didn't want football being played on the Sabbath. But obviously, a lot of men, particularly working class men, that was their sort of day off, their chance to play sport or what they wanted to do. So Sunday League started to emerge against the wishes of the FA. So the league, so the league that we mostly played in was called the Edmonton and District Sunday Football League, and it's sort of believed to be the oldest Sunday league in the world, definitely in England, and England's kind of where organised football as we know it now started, so probably is the oldest league in the world. And yeah, these guys, against the wishes of the FA, just set up a rogue organisation where people could form clubs, you know, and a lot of them were based around pub teams and different things like that. But yeah, it was like an organised league structure where you could have a match, you set up a team and play against other teams. So yeah, that's kind of what Sunday League is, and it's quite it's a subculture, definitely. There's lots around it, you know, sort of. A lot of imagery springs to mind when you think of Sunday League, sort of muddy pitches with dog's mess on it that people have to do sliding tackles through, or whatever it may be, sort of referees getting shouted at, you know, and sometimes worse than that, sadly, but mostly just shouted at, and, you know, good-natured banter and all that sort of stuff. So it's a kind of special thing that definitely you probably start playing Sunday League football when you're around 10, and then, yeah, some people play it through till veterans. There are veterans leagues, so people, you know, in their 60s, there's stories of old boys still playing, you know, right up until they can't walk anymore, pretty much. So it's a subculture, but it's quite a big one.
Yeah, and it's a million miles away from the Premier League and the Championship and all of the other big European leagues, even the MLS in the States. And I suppose it's the proper spirit or soul of the game. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You know, that's probably most of the professional clubs in England. The history of those clubs, if you take it all the way back, would have been amateur clubs set up by groups of friends, and obviously they developed into the, you know, huge sort of multinational companies that a lot of them are now. You know, but yeah, no, historically that's what kind of it is, the purest form of the amateur game.
And that's interesting because you can trace a direct line or relevance between what happens at Sunday League right through to the Premiership. So there will be commonalities. I mean, the pay is different, obviously, and the prestige and the kit and the resources. But fundamentally, it's 11 men or women in terms of leagues playing football. It's the same game with the same rules.
Yeah, and all the things that you see on the television on the Saturday from the professional game, you'll see people trying to copy them on the Sunday, usually failing to, but also some of the stuff like players diving or trying to con the referee, all that stuff. Sunday League, it reflects what's happening in the professional game, but quite rightly, as you say, the financial rewards certainly aren't there. You pay to play Sunday League football because you've got a.
So you must have that situation where people are playing because they love it and have a real passion, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're any good. So if you're running a team, that must be a constant dilemma, is it, between those who are willing and those who are able?
No, it definitely doesn't mean that you're any good necessarily. No, I'd like to think that still within Sunday League teams, it's still a meritocracy. The best players should generally tend to play, but equally, a lot of weeks you're struggling to get 11 players out because you might have some of the players who are suffering with a bad hangover that morning, so you have to draft in what we all know as ringers, and then you get a star ringer in one week who plays really well, scores the hat trick that wins you the game. Do you then drop him the next week for the guy who had the hangover the week before? So there's a lot of yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there's a lot of juggling, that stuff goes on. But generally it's more you need 11 players and you're sort of scraping around on a Sunday morning, 20 minutes before kickoff to see if someone's brother can drive down, from wherever they might be to help you out. So
And one of the things that's always struck me is about sport, and particularly football, I suppose, is the euphoria around scoring a goal. And I mean, is that? I mean, you do all the work, you do all the practice, you do all the drills, you do all the training, you do all that sort of stuff. I mean, how significant is the goal? Is it a pinnacle of achievement? I mean, is it a release? How does that work? Because there's always there seem to be extreme celebrations, don't there? That you don't perhaps see in rugby so much, or cricket or other sports. So tell me a bit about that, because I'm guessing the process is the same in whichever league you play in soccer.
Now, I like that you've assumed that I've scored some goals in my time, Russell.
Let's start there.
Yeah, so it is an amazing feeling, and it is, there's a lot of cliches around it. But actually, I think it, again, partly because you're enjoying it, that moment, it kind of, you're there with 10 teammates who are there to celebrate with you. So you've already got that sort of community around you to enjoy the moment with you, especially if you scored a great goal. And then it's just this one. And then when you're watching football, being part of a crowd where that feeling of maybe 40,000 people all wanting the same thing, and then nearly getting it, maybe a great save by the goalkeeper or a shot hits the post, and you're almost there. You're out of your seat, thinking you're about to have that celebration, and then it doesn't come. Yeah. But then minutes later, it does. That sort of surge from a crowd when you're in a big crowd, when the goal goes in. Honestly, I can't think of too many better feelings than that. I mentioned to you I went to the World Cup this summer in Russia, and just to see people from different countries, because I wasn't following a particular team at the World Cup. We just went to see Russia because it's a place I've always wanted to go to. Fascinating country, amazing history, but equally I've always wanted to go to a World Cup. And to see people from Mexico, from Peru, from Colombia, from Japan, Senegal, wherever, just that all together celebrating, and you get wrapped up in other countries' stories, which is just amazing. So we went to see Colombia play, and my girlfriend lived in Colombia, and she speaks fluent Spanish. And so, suddenly I was sort of, I felt like an adopted Colombian for the day, and just the joy in that stadium was just the best. Honestly, I'd recommend. Obviously, the World Cup's the next one's in Qatar. I won't go into that because that's probably another podcast. But the World Cup after that will be in Canada, Mexico, and the US jointly. Yeah. And I really would say, if you got a chance to go to it, there's nothing like it. It's sensational.
I must admit, I'm not a big sports fan, but I went to France '98, and I was to see the England matches, and it struck me as really interesting how things like chants, how they all work together. You have leaders who whip the crowd into a frenzy. You have, sort of almost, it's almost like this semi-structured process. And I mean, there's someone I've never really been before. I didn't really understand all the sort of rituals.
No.
But within seconds, you're part of it and you're joining in and you're swept along, and it's an amazing gathering point, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think that sense of being able to sort of belong to something quite quickly and easily just by virtue of joining in with a song or wearing your team shirt and going to support them. And it is a beautiful thing. It's special. There's not too many other outlets that sort of offer that, I don't think. And that's why, again, a lot's written about football and fandom and the cultures around the game. But I think that's why, because it is so rich. There's so much there.
And I'm guessing, to go to the other side, the dark side of it, I'm guessing actually if the heights are high, the depths are low. The depths are quite deep. I mean, things like injuries and losses, penalty misses. I mean, we talk about that in England, don't we? But I mean, you see groups of people obviously who don't get on so well. You see teams that aren't really a team and they're quite dysfunctional, but they're trying to play together. You can see they don't really get on. So tell me about that side of the game, because that's actually where resilience comes in, isn't it? To persevere and to dig deep.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think in football, sort of the most interesting, one of those phrases that you often hear in the professional game at the top level is, that there's a lot about management, and a lot of the top managers, people like Alex Ferguson, have written books that sort of now, are used by people in management in other areas, and there's some wisdoms that cross over, maybe some that don't so much. But I think that thing of, there's been a few times with the team that I support where a manager's really embattled. You kind of know they're on their last legs, the results aren't going well, and the resilience to, a lot of them, I guess sometimes there's financial incentives for them not to just jack it in and walk away, quit. But when there's times where the crowd are on their back, and maybe, with social media now, they must be so immersed with everyone's views and hearing all this negative stuff. But to keep going and to try and turn it around, and you hear this phrase, the manager's lost the dressing room, as in the players don't want to play for him anymore. And to have people sort of talking like that, who aren't really in that situation with you, we're, as fans or as the media or whoever, we're not actually in the dressing room most of the time, although we might hear things and get indications. But it must be so hard to, you're being judged when people don't necessarily exactly know what's going on. And, if you've got a set of players and, they're human beings at the end of the day, players get injured, so the key components of your team are injured, or who knows, they may even be going through personal issues that, never come out, or the manager's kind of shielding them from, but that's obviously affecting the performance of the team. There's so much going on in professional sport, and I guess that's why it does captivate people.
And it's interesting, because you watch managers and players who are, almost bullied by social media and by fans. And I remember a football player telling me once that football would be great if it weren't for the fans, because actually some fans can be pretty brutal, pretty abusive, vile. I remember the David Beckham scenario when he came back from that World Cup, and that France '98, and it was horrible. And the way human beings, when they group together, that's a horrible side of any sort of enterprise, isn't it? When people sort of gang each other, bully and and I suppose one of the things about that is, if you're bullying an individual within a team, actually you as a team can pull together to sort of to gain some sort of collective strength.
Definitely. And just touching on the point you make there about injuries, I think I was saying to you, it's almost, and I regret that it kind of took me being injured myself to kind of think about this more. But I go to a lot of Spurs games, and you kind of expect the players just to turn up and perform whatever, but you don't kind of factor in, if someone's coming back from a 9-month injury layoff, how much sort of courage it takes for them to firstly get out on the pitch, sort of physically, is my body going to break down again? Mentally, all the same questions. Is my body going to let me down? When you're an athlete, I would imagine, especially, you're so finely attuned to your body that, and that's kind of your tool, really. That's your bread and butter. It's your physical ability. And once that sort of lets you down, if you have a big injury or something, that must psychologically rock you, definitely. Yeah. But then, as fans, we don't really think too much about that. We're just like, well, he's got the shirt on. They get paid X amount per week, whatever it may be. Get on with it. But actually, how much money you earn doesn't mean that make you stronger necessarily.
Well, Michael Owen was recently talking about the end of his career and saying since he was injured, he was frightened to make fast runs.
Yeah.
And he spent many years being frightened of being found out because actually he couldn't really do the thing he was famous for doing.
Exactly.
And, that must be a horrible way to earn your living, however much you're earning, when you're sitting in a situation where you're just frightened of being found out the whole time.
Yeah, no, definitely. And and so I think, I'm sure that the camaraderie and, that sort of fraternity within squads must count for a lot. But equally also, in professional football, to some extent, they're in competition with each other because you want the starting place. You want to have the shirt. You want to play that week. So, that is something I've always found really interesting. It's kind of often, there's a squad. So the manager's got to pick his best team, but you've got sort of below that the players who aren't necessarily in the first 11 waiting for their opportunity, and their opportunity will probably come around either by one of their teammates being injured or one of their teammates playing really poorly. Yeah. So that dynamic, to manage that is fascinating, really, isn't it? To think, how do you've got to foster that sense of unity and team spirit, all the stuff we love, but actually there's competition within that. So it's really interesting.
So there's a lot of management books written, as you said, and a lot of team building books written and such like. In your experience, what really does work as a transfer between sport and normal life, personal life, not necessarily business? Is there anything you've picked up over the years that have helped your grit and determination or resilience? Is there anything that you could sort of point back to and say, that came from sport or football?
Yeah, definitely. I do think so. I mean, I think determination, there can be times when you're playing football and the other team's better than you. They've got better players than you, but you just keep grafting. You try and chase them. You do the work to shut them down or whatever it may be. The sort of ugly side of the game where you just keep working hard for your own pride, really, just to keep going. And I think that does come through to, things haven't quite worked out in my life, where we'll just keep trying, see where a bit of effort takes you. And at least if it doesn't work out, you don't in the end make a miraculous comeback win. That you've still given it what you had. You tried your best and you can take something away from that. I think also I've managed teams in my working life. So being a captain of a football team and, trying to motivate people to give their best, try and get the best out of them. Definitely the first experience I had of that really was on a football pitch, trying to encourage people and say to, as a younger player, sort of in my teens, trying to say to people, come on, you're playing well, keep doing it, or come on, you can give us a bit more, that sort of thing. So I definitely think I took that into life and work, definitely. Yeah,
that's interesting the way you put the first point about it's almost like integrity of, if we can't win, we play to our best almost. And you can look at yourself in the mirror the next morning, and that's interesting because the way you described your writing, actually coming back around to that, was very much that way, wasn't it? That I'm going to write every single day, and if it doesn't work out, well, you've sort of done the work, haven't you? And that's really important, isn't it?
It is, and not to say that if I hadn't have got a publishing deal, I would have been gutted if it hadn't have come to anything. But I still would have written it. Whether it got published, that kind of was a bit out of my control, but I would have known why I did it. Before I started writing, it was just an idea, and whether I got to see it being sold in bookshops, I can't control that, but I know at least I've given it a chance and I've done my best, and I think it's good, so that counts for something, definitely. Yeah.
And it's one of those books which I think it's not just a story of that, for people that are interested in football. It's actually got it's got some great reviews, and all the reviews say it's not just a story of football, it's actually a story about the human spirit and that sort of stuff, and triumph against the odds, and the sort of things which are really interesting to read, aren't there? A bunch of people winning out.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, sort of, and it's the everyday kind of travails, the highs and lows of kind of everyday life, which I think we can all relate to. Whether it be sort of because we were men, from the books really set sort of from our early 20s through to our 30s, and a lot happens in your life at that point, whether it be bereavements in your family, people having kids, divorces, whatever. It's kind of all those stories are told through us coming together every 7 days to play a game of Sunday League football in the local park. It's kind of so I think
And you've got, and for those of you who are interested in sport, Ewan's got a galaxy of media stars who reviewed the book and been very complimentary about it. Even Jim White. That's rare for him to be complimentary about anything, so that's pretty impressive. But Ewan, if someone would like to have a look at the story and find the book, how can they get hold of it?
So, as is the way nowadays, the easiest way is just to go onto Amazon, and you could type in "We Are Sunday League." Same with Waterstones or WH Smith. Amazon obviously ship all around the world, so wherever you are, you can get it that way. I have a website as well, which is wearesundayleague.com, and there are some reviews on there of the book and an extract from it. You can see my beautiful face on there as well. So have a look there, and hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Brilliant. Well, I've downloaded mine, so I'm looking forward to. It's one of my first books on my next trip, so I'm looking forward to having a proper read of it. You've got me all inspired to look at football. One day I'll be a real boy. Who knows?
The Veterans League.
Sorry?
The Veterans League. It's not too late.
Oh yes, all right. With my dodgy knees. And I'm only 27. What do you mean, veteran?
Oh yes.
Yeah, remember? Anywho, look, it's been brilliant talking to you, and it's been fantastic, and I wish you all the very best. And I know you're, as you say, embarking on the next stage, so I'm expecting to see at least another 10 books in the course of the next couple of years, or something. So you take care.
Thank you very much.
We hope you found today's podcast useful. If you did, why not subscribe and listen to our other podcasts? We would love it if you could leave us a review. To access our resilience coaching, contact us at info@qedod.com. And finally, if you'd like to download our free resilience ebook, go to qedod.com/free ebook. Thanks for listening.